Good morning again. So we will start, and I have the pleasure to present the first talk of this morning session. It will be given by Claire Voisin from CNRS and Institut Mathématique de Jussieu, and she will speak about geometry and topology of hyperkähler manifold.
Okay, so I start by thanking the scientific committee for inviting me to give this talk. So this will be, I would like to introduce you to very interesting and very rich class of compact Kähler manifolds, which is very restricted from the viewpoint of complex geometry, Riemannian geometry, symplectic geometry, and also topology. But also it is very rich, so there is an obvious comparison with the class of compact complex tori. But from the viewpoint of Riemannian geometry, the compact complex tori, they are flat, so not so interesting. And the topology is very well understood. It's just a product of S1s. And here we will meet some manifolds which are similar in some sense, but which form a much richer class from the viewpoint of classification. Okay, so that is my goal, and I will explain a few results concerning these compact Kähler manifolds. So I didn't say that what is beautiful is that at the end, this is via algebraic geometry that we will be able to construct interesting models and deformation classes. Okay, so I start from the beginning, explaining what is a Kähler manifold. So I start with a complex manifold. So it's just a manifold in the usual sense, except that you are given an atlas of a system of local charts, which are called holomorphic local holomorphic coordinates with value in C to the n. N is a complex dimension, and you want that the change of coordinates maps are given by a holomorphic functions. And when you have a complex manifold, automatically you have a weaker structure on it, which is called an almost complex structure, and which is the data of a complex structure on the tangent bundle. That is the structure of a complex vector bundle on the tangent bundle of X. And such data is characterized by an endomorphism of the real tangent bundle whose square is a minus identity that will play the role of multiplication by a square root of minus 1 in the complex structure. And the relationship between complex structure and almost complex structure is that if you want to go back from the data of an almost complex structure to the data of a complex structure, you need an integrability condition that you cannot see in dimension, complex dimension 1. This is the Riemann case, and that you meet, and that was found by Nylander and Nierenberg. Okay, so when you have this data, so you have your X, and the tangent bundle has a structure of a complex vector bundle, so you can speak of a Hermitian metric on this X. This is simply a Hermitian metric on the tangent bundle equipped with this complex structure. And so this Hermitian metric, it's split into its real and imaginary part. The real part will be a metric in the usual sense. So in particular, you will have the whole machinery of Riemannian geometry which applies. And the imaginary part, as you can see from the general properties of Hermitian matrices, it gives you a two-form on it's a skew symmetric, so it's a two-form on the non-degenerate on X. And the definition of a Kähler metric is that this two-form is closed. Well, if you see it like this, it's not very enlightening, but there is, in fact, a much much easier to catch the characterization of a Kähler metric. It's the fact that the operator I of almost a complex structure is parallel for the Levi-Civita connection of G. And in particular, the Kähler metrics on a real manifold of even dimension 2n, they are exactly the metrics of holonomy contained in the group U of n, which is the subgroup of GL2n preserving, made of complex linear automorphisms. Okay, so that's it for the Riemannian side of Kähler geometry. And now the class of hyperkähler manifolds will be a particular class inside the class of compact Kähler manifolds with a trivial canonical bundle. So when you have a complex manifold X, you have a holomorphic line bundle, which is defined as the top exterior power of the cotangent bundle. So that means that so your local holomorphic coordinates Z1 to Zn will give you local holomorphic one forms, dz1 to dzn, and they will generate by definition the holomorphic cotangent bundle. They are the holomorphic one forms. And the canonical bundle, it is locally generated in this trivialization by dz1 wedge to wedge dzn. And so that gives you the local holomorphic trivialization of this line bundle. And the conclusion is that your, this canonical bundle Kx, is trivial as a holomorphic line bundle if and only if X has an everywhere non-zero holomorphic n form eta X. Holomorphic n forms, it is of this form multiplied by a holomorphic function, and it is non-zero if the holomorphic function is non-zero. Okay, so this is the class I will consider. And in the subject of compact Kähler manifolds with trivial canonical bundle, there is a fundamental result, which is due to Yao, which was even more general because here I will assume that the canonical bundle is trivial as a holomorphic line bundle, but in fact the Yao theorem applies more generally if you know that the first Chern class of the canonical bundle is trivial. So the result by Yao is that if you have a compact Kähler manifold with trivial canonical bundle, it admits Kähler-Einstein metrics. Kähler-Einstein, that means that the metric is Kähler, and furthermore it is Ricci flat. The Ricci flatness, of course, it's a very complicated equation, but in fact there is a very easy interpretation of Ricci flatness in that case, where I assume that the canonical bundle is trivial. The Ricci flatness, it is equivalent to the fact that the holomorphic n form that exists and is unique up to multiplication by a constant is in fact a parallel for the Levi-Civita connection. So that means that you will have an extra tensor. We already had the I, but now there will be this holomorphic n form, which is flat for the Levi-Civita connection, and which will restrict again the holonomy now to be in the special unitary group. And the hyperkähler manifolds that I want to discuss, they are defined, they are introduced here. I say that a compact Kähler manifold of dimension 2n now, this is a complex dimension, it has to be even because another phrasing for hyperkähler is a symplectic holomorphic, so it's in particular even complex dimension. It is hyperkähler if it is simply connected and it has holomorphic two forms. So holomorphic two forms, it takes in local holomorphic coordinate, it takes this form where the alpha ig are holomorphic function, and the matrix, of course, alpha ig is skew symmetric, which is unique up to a scalar, or complex scalar, and which is everywhere non-degenerate. So this is the notion of symplectic holomorphic. Everywhere non-degenerate, that means that the matrix which appears here as non-zero determinant at every point. More conceptually, this is saying that if you take the nth power of your form sigma x, it is this is called the Pfaffian. It is called non-zero at any point, and this gives a trivialization of the canonical bundle, because then we get a 2n holomorphic 2n form, which is non-zero at any point. So in particular, this compact Kähler manifold have trivial canonical bundle, and the Yau theorem applies. And Beauville, who started this subject in the compact setting, observes that the Kähler-Einstein metrics, which are provided by Yau, have the following properties. This is a consequence of the Borchner principle, that if you consider your X, which is a compact Kähler, hyperkähler, it has the property that the holomorphic forms on X are parallel for any Kähler-Einstein metric, parallel for the associated Levi-Civita connection. And so this implies that the Kähler-Einstein metrics on hyperkähler manifolds, they have a still more restricted holonomy group, namely because we have this parallel holomorphic two form. The holonomy group has to preserve the two form at any point, and that's why now the holonomy group it is contained in the symplectic group in 2n complex variables, so that it has to preserve skew symmetric non-degenerate bilinear form at the given point where we compute the holonomy, and intersected with, of course, the unitary group of 2n complex variables. This is a general Kähler restriction. And in fact, of course, here it is just saying that the fact that the holomorphic two forms are parallel, that will just say that the Kähler-Einstein metrics have holonomy contained in that group. But in fact, well, by Berger classification of holonomy groups, Beauville shows that this is actually equal to this group. And the last, before going to more algebro-geometric properties of these varieties, the last remarkable structure that we find on these hyperkähler manifolds, and which also depends on the existence of Kähler-Einstein metrics, is the quaternionic structure. So suppose that you have your hyperkähler manifold, you take a Kähler-Einstein metric on it, and now out of this data you get three real closed two forms on X which are parallel for the Levi-Civita connection. First of all, I mentioned that the Kähler form is parallel, so that's the omega. And then because by this Beauville theorem, you know that sigma x is parallel, the real part and the imaginary part of sigma x both are parallel. So finally, you have these two forms, and out of them you can construct pointwise an action of the fields of quaternion on the tangent bundle. And now, what does when you have this action of the field of quaternion? In particular, you can consider the group of pure quaternions of norm 1. They are all exactly the numbers in the field of quaternion whose square is equal to -1. Okay? So each of these numbers they will induce an almost complex structure on the tangent on X. Now the crucial point is that all of these almost complex structures, they are integrables. So that shows that the quaternionic structure, it is very strong in the sense, very rich in the sense that the sphere of almost complex structures that you get on the tangent on X, in fact, parameterize actually complex structures. And that follows from the fact that we know that omega, the two forms that you get here, they are parallel, and it follows that all the almost complex structures that you get here, they are also parallel for G. And then we know that this is a nice statement, the fact that if you have an almost complex structure which is parallel for a Levi-Civita connection, automatically it is integrable. So that's it's an easy computation. Okay, so as you see, that's very, as you can see, this is a very rich structure, so very restricted. And now what I want to explain is the main topological feature of the hyperkähler manifolds, which was originally due to Boville, Bogomolov, and then has been also been developed by Fujiki. So it's a general topological property that concerns the cohomology algebra of hyperkähler manifold. So the result is the following. Suppose that you have a hyperkähler 2n form, 2n fold. Then there exists a quadratic form Q on, say, H2 of X with a Q coefficient. So, of course, you can put Z coefficient here and normalize your Q so that it is integral and non-divisible. And the coefficient mu x, which is a positive rational number, such that we have the following formula for any alpha in which is a degree 2 cohomology class on X. This is called the Fujiki relation. And this says that when you compute the integral over X of alpha to the 2n, this is mu x time Q of alpha to the n. Of course, this form can be defined on any oriented real manifold of dimension 4n. So this gives you a certain homogeneous polynomial on a cohomology of degree 2. But here, what is saying this theorem is that this homogeneous polynomial, it is a power, up to a coefficient, it is a power of a quadratic form, which is absolutely exceptional. I mean, if you want to construct at hand topological spaces satisfying this construction, you will see that it is not so common, that it is very restrictive. For example, the products of projective spaces, they will not satisfy this property. So maybe I sketch a proof of so what is very beautiful is that to prove the existence of this Q, you can use the deformation theory of your of the complex structure on X. So let me sketch a little how it works. The deformation, what we call the deformation of the complex structure, it is a deformation of the tensor of almost complex structure that preserves the integrability condition. And in the subject of compact Kähler manifold with trivial canonical bundle, we have the BTT theorem that says that the small deformation of compact Kähler manifold with trivial canonical bundle, they are unobstructed. That is, they are parameterized by a smooth analytic space. Usually we meet obstruction, so the deformation theory produces singular spaces. So it's very nice. So we know how to deform. We know the tangent space of the space of deformation. And then comes the idea of the period map, which is essentially due to Griffiths, which does the following. So each time of course, your X, the underlying differentiable manifold is fixed, and you deform your complex structure to, and you call it XT. This is X equipped with the deformed complex structure IT. Now, your XT, it is still a hyperkähler, so it has a holomorphic two-form sigma XT. And what does the period map is that to a point T in B, so B is a germ of an analytic space which parameterizes our small deformation of X. And to each T, it associates the line generated by sigma XT, which is a line contained in H2 of X with a complex coefficient. So finally, the local period map is a map from B to this projective space. And in fact, we know very well, thanks to the work of Griffiths, how to compute the differential of this period map. And the conclusion is that we find in that case that the period map is a holomorphic embedding whose image inside this complex projective space is a germ of analytic hypersurface. Okay, so let's call it Y. So it is just a germ. We just do things very locally. Now the point is that if you consider sigma xt, so that will be a general point in this Y, it has the property that sigma xt to the n plus 1 is equal to 0 because sigma xt it is of type 2, 0 for the deformed structure. So sigma xt to the n plus 1, it is of type 2n plus 2, 0, so it is 0. So so we have this equation which holds as a form, but a fortiori it will hold as a cohomology class on X diff. And because we have this formula, you conclude that f of sigma xt is equal to 0. And then you conclude that your y, it is contained in the hypersurface defined by f equals 0. And because this one is a hypersurface, this was in a non-trivial hypersurface. We know that because X is scalar. And so you conclude that there is an open set in this hypersurface, which is set theoretically the same thing as this Y. So, and in fact, we can say a little more because here we have a sigma xt to the n plus 1 equals 0, which is stronger than a sigma xt to the 2n equals 0. And because of the difference of power of index, in fact, what we can say is that your polynomial equation f here, it vanishes to order at least n along y. And so you conclude that your polynomial, your degree 2n polynomial here, it has a component of a multiplicity at least n. And then you conclude simply by degree consideration that this component has to be of degree at most 2. And finally, you conclude that it defines a quadric. And that will give you the quadratic form Q. So it's remarkable because that's a topological result that is proved that finally will be true on cohomology with a rational, even integral coefficient, but that you prove by working really with forms, with holomorphic forms, and by using deformation theory. Okay, so of course this was a bit general. So I'm now, of course, this is many nice properties satisfied by these manifolds. But in fact, they exist. This is the most surprising. And not only they exist, but we already know that there exist several topological tapes for each dimension, each even complex dimension. Except for dimension 2, that is complex surfaces, we know by the work of Kodaira that there is only one class of hyperkähler manifolds of dimension 2, namely the Khitri surfaces. And to obtain the deformation class, and in particular the topological tape, you consider simply a smooth surface inside the complex projective tree space defined by a degree 4 homogeneous polynomial. So the degree 4 condition, it is equivalent to the fact that the surface has trivial canonical bundle. And well, it is known that there are the only hyperkähler manifolds of dimension 2. And next, to go to higher dimension, there is an auxiliary construction which is really inside algebraic geometry. So we will use so this construction was due independently to Bouville and Fujiki, the notion of punctual Hilbert scheme. So let's start with a smooth complex surface. In fact, the punctual Hilbert scheme can be defined for any complex manifold of any dimension, but it's only for in dimension 1 and 2 that this will give rise to a smooth manifold. So let's consider the case of a surface. You can consider the symmetric product for any case, the case symmetric product. So it is the ordinary power Sk quotiented by the symmetric group. So this Sk between parentheses, it parameterizes the data of K unordered point in S. When I say K unordered point, of course, some points may collide. So finally, the point will sometimes appear with a multiplicity, and the sum of the multiplicity should be K. Now the point is that the action of the symmetric group on Sk, it is not free because, of course, you have some isotropy group when your data x1 to xk have 2 points xi which coincide. And because of this isotropy group, so the quotient is singular in that case, and of course it is of dimension 2k. And the Hilbert scheme, the punctual Hilbert scheme, Sk between brackets, it is a desingularization of this symmetric product, and the object here, they are, instead of the data of k points counted with multiplicity, you will consider geometric objects which are finite subschemes of a dimension 0 of so-called length equal to k. So this is a more refined information that you put at any point. So you have your collection of points with multiplicities, say di, where the sum of the di is k. And over each point, the extra information that you have in the S, in the Hilbert scheme, is that you put a schematic structure on length di, over which is supported on xi. So for example, typically a schematic structure of length 2, length 1 is just a point, length 2 that will be a point plus a tangent vector. So it's a set of infinitesimal conditions imposed to local holomorphic function. Length 3 that so here I picture that what could be a schematic structure of length 2. It's either 2 points or 1 point plus 1 tangent vector. And 3 points, it's you can when you specialize, you can get 1 point plus a length 2 structure. And now you specialize again, the 3 points collide, and then you have to put a length 3 schematic structure. And there are already of 2 sorts. There are the curvilinear ones, where you have, that is those which are supported on a smooth curve. That is, you have a point plus a tangent vector plus a second or an acceleration vector. And that impose 3 conditions to vanishing on that, impose 3 conditions to the holomorphic function. But there is an extra, it's not enough, it does not compactify the fiber. You have to also add this scheme, which is 1 point plus all the tangent direction at that point. That is, you have to consider all the holomorphic functions which vanish at the point and whose differential vanish at the point. And that makes 3 conditions imposed to the. to the local holomorphic function at that point. Okay, so that's the object parameterized by this Hilbert scheme. It's in higher for higher multiplicity. We don't have a full description or classification of the subscheme, zero-dimensional subschemes of a given length supported at a point. Okay, so that's the object, and we know by Fogarty that it is smooth when S is a smooth surface, and the relevance for the subject is this result due to Beauville and Fujiki, that if you start from a Khetri surface, that is in fact that is a surface which has a non-zero, nowhere zero holomorphic two form, then S, it's a Hilbert scheme is a hyperkähler of dimension 2k. So to show that it is hyperkähler, you have to show that it is simply connected. It's not extremely hard, and also you have to produce a holomorphic two form which is non-degenerate. You start from the two form on your Khetri surface. You consider sigma of PR I upper star of these two form on the usual product S to the K. It is symmetric under the symmetric group, so it will descend to the S to the symmetric product S K to the between parentheses. And then you have to work a little to show that this two form, which is defined on a singular space, it extends to it pull back to a symplectic holomorphic structure on the desingularization S bracket K. Okay. Now, as I said, we know that there are further topological types, that is other hyperkähler manifolds which of the same dimension, which are not homomorphic to the previous one. There are the generalized Kummer varieties, which were constructed by Beauville. So the construction, in some sense, is very similar. You start from, instead of starting from a Khetri surface, you start from an abelian surface, or in general, compact complex torus of dimension 2. It also has a trivial canonical bundle, so you can do the same construction as before, but the problem is that what you will get is not simply connected, not surprisingly, because the surface from which you start A is not simply connected. But you can, it turns out that you can consider instead the A to the n plus 1. Sorry, there is a n which should be K, or a K which should be n. So you do the instead of the S to the n that we used before, you consider S to A to the n plus 1. And you remove from that one summand, essentially this object, it is well, A cross hyperkähler manifold that is the generalized Kummer Kn of A, which is of dimension 2n. And Beauville proves that it is a hyperkähler manifold. And so we have already these two series with one deformation class in each even dimension, even complex dimension. And there are two more examples which have been constructed by O'Grady in the 2000 and something. So there is one which is a 10-dimensional, which is built started from a Khetri surface, and another which is 6-dimensional, which is built starting from an abelian surface, more generally a complex torus of dimension 2. So it's hard, this construction, so maybe I will not explain too much how it is done. Well, I mentioned that in fact, so we construct these objects starting from a Khetri surface. But in fact, the deformation theory of hyperkähler manifold is very well known, and we can show that when the object that we have constructed by this auxiliary construction, like Hilbert schemes or moduli species starting from a Khetri surface, they do not exhaust all the deformation. There are other deformations of the complex structure that completely lose the original Khitri surface. And that's simply because you count the parameters. There are not enough parameters starting from a Khitri surface or an abelian surface. So the general deformation is something where we do not see anymore the Khitri surface. So from the viewpoint of topology, all the two or three models that we have, they are different simply because you compute the second Betti number. So for SK, it is 23 starting from k equal 2. For the generalized Kummer, it is 7 for k at least 2. And the two Grady models, they also provide different topological types. Okay, so that's it for well, the construction or the construction of topological or the deformation tapes. That is all that we know. The big question is here. For example, we don't know if for a given complex dimension, even of course dimension, there are finitely homeomorphism classes of hyperkähler manifolds. Finitely many homeomorphism classes, it's essentially the same as finitely many deformation classes. But, for some reasons, it's equivalent. Okay, so well, so now here I am going to focus on dimension 4. In dimension 4, there are very nice results. One is due to Guan in 2001. It builds on a result by Simon Salamon and by Misha Verbitsky. It says that if you have a hyperkähler manifold of complex dimension 4, either its second Betti number is 23, or B2 of X is none greater than 8. So you remark that for this is achieved for X Hilbert scheme, Hilbert square of a Khitri surface, S2. And for here, B2 of X equals 7, it is achieved for the second generalized Kummer manifold K2 of M. Maybe one remark is that a hyperkähler manifold always has B2 at least 3, and we already met that because you always have a Kähler class plus the real and imaginary part of the holomorphic two form, and you can see that the three classes are independent. Okay, but apart from this information, well, Guan says a little more about what are the possible other Betti numbers in this range, but still we don't know if there are other, if the other Betti numbers are realized, of course. So as I said, Guan uses an important result by Salamon, which gives in any dimension an affine linear relation between the Betti numbers B0 to the B2n of B0 equal 1 of a hyperkähler manifold. And Verbitsky, it's a very nice result which concerns well, the cohomology algebra. Well, you consider the Baker product. You have a natural morphism from the symmetric algebra built on H2 to the cohomology algebra of X. And Verbitsky says that this morphism is injective until up to degree n. And he describes explicitly the kernel of this morphism. Okay, so now I state one result that I obtained with my collaborators Olivier Debar, Daniel Webrecht, and Emmanuel Macri, which gives a topological characterization of hyperkähler fourfolds of the deformation tape, which are deformations of heap 2 of a K3. So the result is the following. So suppose that you have a hyperkähler fourfold X, which satisfies this condition, namely it admits two integral cohomology classes L and M, missing parentheses, satisfying these conditions. The integral over X of L to the 4 is 0, the integral over X of M to the 4 is 0. So equivalently, if you want to use the Q, this is saying that Q of L is 0 or Q of M is 0. And this is very important, the integral over X of L square M square is equal to 2. So we can show that this 2 is a minimal because this number is always divisible by 2 under the conditions. Then X is a deformation of K32. And conversely, of course, the deformation of K32 satisfies these conditions. So you see that in fact, this is a topological characterization of these hyperkähler manifolds because the conditions are purely topological. You just consider integral cohomology and satisfying certain conditions which are dictated by the cohomology algebra structure. So it depends only on the topology. And in particular, if X is a hyperkähler fourfold which is homeomorphic to the Hilbert scheme of a K3 surface, then it is a deformation of a Hilbert scheme of a K3 surface. And this corollary, so it is one version, one stronger version of a conjecture statement which had been conjectured by O'Grady and who made a very nice progress towards it. So he was considering hyperkähler fourfolds which are numerically equivalent to K32. So this statement is even it's rather weaker than his. And numerically, it is saying that the pair H2 of X Z equipped with its quadratic form, so it's called the lattice of a hyperkähler manifold, is isomorphic to that of heap 2 of K3. Okay. And I must say that in some sense we use a little the work of O'Grady as a guide in the classification part of that theorem. Okay, so this is one result on the topology or classification or geometry of hyperkähler fourfolds. And now I would like to finish. What time is it? So maybe I will finish earlier. But, so now I would like to turn to a different aspect of topology. Here I have been discussing the Betti cohomology and the cohomology algebra structure that really actually depends on the homeomorphism tape, or maybe a homotopy tape of a manifold or of topological space. Now I would like to discuss the different notion of topology, which is the complex cobordism. It's completely different because as a refined notion of cobordism, and it is weaker in some sense, weaker and stronger. In any case, it is different than the Betti numbers. It is related, as we will see, to the Chern numbers, which themselves are related to the curvature of of the considered complex or almost complex manifold. So to give an example, so I mentioned that this class of a hyperkähler manifold, it is comparable to the compact complex tori. But the compact complex tori, this is very nice, of course. We understand very well the topology, that the cohomology algebra is just the wedge product of the H1. But in fact, from the viewpoint of a complex cobordism, they are totally uninteresting, precisely because they are flat, so the Chern classes are trivial, and so we see nothing using the Chern numbers. While, to the contrary, the general hyperkähler manifold, they have some curvature, they have some non-trivial Chern numbers, and the structure is quite interesting. So what is a complex cobordism? It was introduced by Milnor, also not in the form that I mentioned here. It's a very, some sense, a very basic construction. You construct the complex ring mu star of a point, so it is graded by this number star, which is the dimension, the real dimension of the object. You will construct the mu I of a point as a quotient of a certain free abelian group by relations. The free abelian group of generators in degree star equal to I, the generators are the diffeomorphism or equivalence classes of pairs M alpha, where M is a compact differentiable manifold of dimension I, now it's a real dimension, and alpha is a stable, almost complex structure on M, which means that you consider, you give you the structure of a complex vector bundle on the tangent bundle plus a trivial real vector bundle. And this is where the word stable appears, is the fact that you add this R to the K, and it is important because if the dimension is odd, you need to make it even in order to put a complex structure on the vector bundle. Okay, so these are the data, and now the relations are as follows. You consider now a compact differentiable manifold of dimension I plus 1, which has with a boundary. And you consider a stable, almost complex structure on N. Now the point is that when you restrict to the boundary delta N, you see that the restriction of the tangent bundle of N to the boundary, it is the tangent bundle of the boundary plus the normal direction. So you get a trivial line. Which is a normal direction, and so the data of an almost complex of a complex structure on this vector bundle will give a stable almost complex structure on delta n. So so in this sense we have the boundary of n alpha. It is delta n equipped with this restricted almost stable almost complex structure. And the mu I of a point is a quotient of this free abelian group by the subgroup generated by boundaries. And for the ring structure, you have the sum which is induced by the disjoint union of two objects, and the multiplication is induced by simply the product. You have x alpha and y beta. You consider x cross y with the obvious induced stable almost complex structure. Now there is another way of describing this complex cobordism ring, which is via the Chern numbers. When you have a complex vector bundle on a topological X, it has Chern classes Ci of E, which are integral even degree cohomology classes on X. So maybe I don't say more about that. Now suppose that you have a generator for our complex cobordism ring, so M alpha, by definition, you get a complex vector bundle on M, which is a Tm plus a trivial vector bundle equipped with a given stable almost complex structure. And so associated to that, we get Chern classes, which are the Chern classes of this complex vector bundle on M. So that gives you integral cohomology classes on M. Furthermore, your M is oriented. This is orientation given by the stable almost complex structure, because the stable almost complex structure, it is the data of a complex structure on Tm plus a trivial vector bundle. A complex structure, it induces an orientation, which is called the complex orientation. So Tm plus a trivial bundle is oriented, so Tm is oriented. So you get an orientation. And so if you have any polynomial P in the Chern classes, you get a Chern number, which is obtained by integrating over M the polynomial P, where I put the Ci of M alpha in the variables. So this polynomial P, of course, it should be of the total cohomological degree equal to the real dimension of M. Well, since the degree of Ci is 2i, you need that the polynomial P is weighted homogeneous of degree equal to the real dimension of M in these variables, where of course I assign to these variables their cohomological degree. Now the point is that the Chern numbers they factor through the complex cobordism that follows from the Stokes formula, because and the functionality of Chern classes, because if n is a manifold with boundary and alpha is a stable almost complex structure on n, Ci of n alpha restricted to delta n, it is a Ci of the delta n equipped with a restricted almost complex structure. And so you conclude that by Stokes, you have the vanishing of the corresponding of the Chern numbers of a boundary. And so there is this result. We say that computing the complex cobordism class is the same as computing the Chern numbers. So the hard result is that the mu star of point has no torsion and is trivial in odd degree. And the much easier result is that if you consider now the complex cobordism ring tensor Q, it is isomorphic via the Chern number map, which to M associates the data of all the Chern numbers to the dual of the space of polynomials of weighted degree 2i in the Chern classes. So it is an infinite polynomial algebra with Q coefficient, with one generator in each even degree. That gives sometimes a different polynomial structure, so which is complicated compared to the original ring structure that I explained via taking just the geometric product. And one can show by explicit computation that the complex projective space form a multiplicative basis of mu star of point tensor Q. Or if you like, if you consider the arbitrary product of complex projective spaces, they form an additive basis of the complex cobordism ring. So I would like to describe a result that I obtained with Oberdick and Song. So you observe that if you consider a hyperkähler manifold, of course it has a complex structure, so it has an almost complex structure, so it has a class in the complex cobordism ring, and we will be interested into these classes. Now, my hyperkähler manifold, it's a non-degenerate holomorphic two-form sigma x. This non-degenerate two-form gives an isomorphism between Tx and its dual, which is the cotangent bundle. And this isomorphism implies that the odd degree Chern classes will vanish, because there is a general formula that if you consider Ci of A dual, it is -1 to the I, Ci of A. So if A is isomorphic to its dual, its odd Chern classes will be 0, at least modulo some possible two torsion. So we have this vanishing, and so that's this saying that the complex cobordist classes of hyperkähler manifold, they belong to a subring of the complex cobordist ring, which I will call the even complex cobordist ring, made of classes which pair to zero with all monomials, where you have one non-trivial odd Chern variable pairing, for example. So the meaning is that the odd Chern classes are zero. And what we proved with Oberdig and Zong is that the cobordism, complex cobordism classes of Hilbert schemes of K3 surfaces, so of course in a given deformation class, you get only one complex cobordism class, they form a multiplicative basis of the complex cobordism ring tensor Q. And there is a similar statement with where you replace the Hilbert scheme of K3 surfaces by the generalized Kummer manifolds. You can formulate the same result additively. This is saying that if you consider arbitrary products of SK or of generalized Kummer, they form an additive basis of the complex cobordism ring tensor Q. So that raises a nice geometric question. Namely, now we have two bases, one which is built from the product of KK of A, one which is built from this object. And so in particular, you have a matrix for each K expressing SK, the complex cobordism class of SK, as a combination of the complex cobordism classes of the KK of A. And what is this matrix? That will be, how to compute it. Well, of course, it's very, for small k, it's very easy because we know we compute the Chern numbers. We just have to invert a matrix, so it's quite easy. But in general, that would be nice to have the geometric meaning of this matrix. And one question that is very curious is whether the coefficients that we get are all positive. So we computed, or my young collaborator does computed, so we get huge numbers, that these coefficients are positive for n non greater than 7, so maybe it's true in general. So you tell me when I should stop. Okay, perfect. So just to say one thing about one word about the proof of that. It's a general strategy to prove that that statement that uses the top Chern character. Well, so maybe I should not say too much about that. So the Chern character, it's a formal power series in the Chern classes that is built by introducing the formal roots of the Chern polynomial. The formal roots of the Chern polynomial, they just think that they are formal objects which have the property that their symmetric functions give the Chern classes, and out you apply this expression to the formal roots, and that gives you something just by the Newton principle that this expression in the formal roots will give you a power series with rational coefficients in the Chern classes. So this is the Chern character. But the Chern character, it's very obvious that it has this property that the Chern character of a direct sum of two complex vector bundles, this is the sum of the two Chern characters as a series with coefficient in the cohomology algebra of X. And so what I call the Milnor genus of X, where X is an almost complex manifold or stable almost complex manifold, dimension n. This is the Chern number defined by integrating over X the top Chern character class. And it's an obvious lemma that if you have an X which is a product of almost complex manifolds, a non-trivial product into two factors of a positive dimension, then the M of X will be 0. It's obvious because you apply this additivity property that will say that the Chern character of your product X cross Y, it will be the sum of the pullbacks of the Chern characters of x1 and of x2. But in top degree, they are 0 because they are pulled back from something of smaller dimension. So you have this criterion for to decide if X is a product or not. And using that criterion, you get an easy criterion. Using that fact, you get an easy criterion guaranteeing that a given collection of objects, one for each degree, will be a multiplicative basis of your complex cobordism ring. And finally, the main result, so the main theorem, in fact, it is just one computation in each dimension, saying that the Milnor genus of SK is non-zero, and similarly, the Milnor genus of KK of A is non-zero. So this is, you can reduce immediately the main theorem to that computation, which is absolutely not easy. One interesting point is that when proving this, there is an explicit computation of these numbers, and the result is that the sign that we get, they are always a -1 to the k. And so that suggests that maybe that is always true, that if you have a hyperkähler manifold of dimension 2n, the sign of it's a Milnor genus is always a -1 to the n. So maybe I'll stop here.
Are there questions, comments in the room? So maybe with a microphone. Yes, because.
So, are you saying that to generate the Milnor ring, you just need the Chern character n of each of the things?
Absolutely.
That's what. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you check the question for OG6 and OG10?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Other questions? Otherwise, we will have plenty of time because it will be now the coffee break, and the next talk will be at 11. So let's thank Claire again.